This is Sunny from Stacklet. Today we're going to be walking through how you can use Cloud Custodian to respond to security or compliance events in real time to remain well managed in the cloud. Cloud Custodian is a YAML-based TSL that enables you to easily write policies that can inspect, respond, and secure your cloud environment. As an overview, Cloud Custodian policies can be either run in a pull-based mode, where a custodian will query against your cloud provider for resource metadata, or an event-based mode, where it will respond to native events such as CloudTrail, AWS config changes, EC2 ASG changes, and more. Today we'll be looking at the CloudTrail mode. To get started, let's go to the AWS console, and here we'll be creating an IAM role that we'll use for Cloud Custodian to execute policies. These event-based modes utilize AWS Lambda as well as integrations with CloudWatch events to respond to events that are fired off inside of your cloud environment. In order to do that, we will need to enable a trust relationship between Lambda and IAM. So in this case, we'll just be selecting Lambda and clicking on to go to the permissions. From here, we're going to be adding the AWS Lambda basic execution policy. This is going to let our Lambda create log groups, write to that log group, as well as any additional permissions that are needed for basic Lambda execution. On top of that, we'll also be adding this S3 read put bucket encryption policy, which I created right before, which basically allows us to read any sort of S3 metadata, as well as to do the put encryption configuration action on our bucket. Next, we'll just give this a name. We'll call it Cloud Custodian, and we'll create the role. Now that the role has been created, let's hop over to our terminal to construct our very first event-based policy. So here in the terminal, we're just going to create a new file called policy.yaml. We'll create the top-level policies key, and we'll give this a S3 encrypt bucket name. And of course, for the resource, we'll also be selecting S3. From here, if you're writing a basic pull mode policy, you would simply start constructing your filters. But because we're doing event-based policies today, we're actually going to first create our mode definition. Our mode today will be CloudTrail. Our role will be our Cloud Custodian role that we just created. Then for our events, we're going to be needing the source, the event itself, as well as this IDs key. And we'll hop back over to AWS to see how we can get these values. But for now, we'll just fill out the rest of these filters. In this case, for our filter, we want to check bucket encryption. And we'll say, if the encryption on the bucket is set to false, then we're going to want to filter that in. And what we'll want to do is simply set bucket encryption. So that's the skeleton of our policy here. Let's go back to the AWS console. We can see how we can get those three source, event, and ID fields. So back in the AWS console, we're simply going to navigate back to the home screen, and we're going to look for CloudTrail. Now that we're in the CloudTrail console, the next thing we're going to want to do is go into our event history, and we're simply going to look for an event that matches the one that we care about. In this case, we're looking for the create bucket event. So inside of create bucket, we can look into any of these, and we're going to take a look at our event source, which is S3 Amazon AWS.com, our event name, which is going to be create bucket, and then to retrieve the IDs, we're simply going to go into the body of the event here, and we're going to look for the resource identifier. In this case, it's request parameters, bucket name. So we're going to be creating a very simple JMES path in order to extract the value out of the event, and that will tell custodian what resources it should query. So let's go back to our terminal. And like we said, for the event source, we're simply going to select s3.amazonaws.com. The event will be create bucket, and the IDs will be request parameters dot bucket name. Let's save that file and exit. Next, what we'll do is we'll do custodian validate on our policy.yaml. And it looks like our policy is validated. So what we can do next is we can simply run policy.yaml, specify an output. In this case, this is just a local output, and we'll also specify the region to be US East 1. So when we execute this, what custodian will do is it'll provision a AWS Lambda as well as a CloudWatch event rule. Now if we go back to the console, we'll be able to see that Lambda as well as the corresponding CloudWatch event. So now that we're back in the browser, we'll scroll up and look for Lambda. And now we'll see that we have indeed created this Custodian S3 encrypt bucket. In order to test this, let's go into the S3 console and we'll create an unencrypted bucket and see what happens. So we'll simply create bucket. We'll just call this test sunny unencrypted. And of course, we will want to ensure that disable server-side encryption is selected. So we'll click on create bucket. And now let's go and look at our bucket. So obviously no objects. If we go to properties, we see that default encryption has been enabled. So basically what happened was we created the bucket, the Lambda function was triggered due to the CloudWatch event rule and automatically set the encryption on the bucket. We could go to Lambda right now to see that as well. So if we go into Lambda, and we click into our actual Custodian Lambda function that we created, and view our logs in CloudWatch. Here we can take a look at the CloudWatch logs, and you can see that it applied one filter, bucket encryption, it found one resource, and then it invoked the action which was set bucket encryption here. So this was all a very quick and easy guide to get started with event-based policies in Cloud Custodian. There are many other policies that you could write as well to streamline your cloud governance and keep a well-managed cloud. If you're interested in more about Cloud Custodian, come check out our Gitter at gitter.im/cloud-custodian/cloud-custodian, or check us out on GitHub at github.com/cloud-custodian.